I'm just going to apologise now and say I'm sat here on mute because I'm in the staff room, so I'm trying to minimise the noise. So if I suddenly start talking and you can't hear me, it's because I've forgotten to unmute like an update.
Okay. Can you all see my screen all right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously, as I just said, we're looking at subject leadership. Obviously, what I want to get from this session is just for you to have a think about what subject leadership looks like. And obviously, it might look slightly differently for you within your school. I mean, obviously, if you're secondary, you're going to have that responsibility and be teaching it all of the time. If you're primary, it might be that you've got a particular interest in that subject and you've been asked to take it on. It could be for some NQTs, and I hope it's not for any of ours, but you never know. It's a subject that nobody else wants, so you've been given it. Or it could be that you've got that particular shortage, and obviously in mainstream primary, you're not necessarily being immersed in that subject quite as much in relation to both you teaching it and seeing it all the time. So to have a think about what your own strengths are in taking on the role, and obviously working from your strengths, having to think about what should be in a subject leadership file, and then answer any questions you might have moving forward, or if we can't answer the questions, to be able to signpost you to where we might be able to get help or somebody you might be able to go and see. So some possible questions. So what does subject leadership mean? What does subject leadership mean to you guys? Anyone like to start us off?
I definitely say a large aspect of it is monitoring your team and assisting and helping your team who also teach the subject. So in primary, any of the other teachers that will then lead that on, like here, for example, science, it would be any of the science teachers or support staff and helping them improve and so on.
Okay. We've got monitoring and assessing. Anything else you think it might cover?
We have WHO progression steps here, so making sure that all the teachers are hitting our WHO progression steps in that particular area.
Okay, so ensuring progression, yeah, I'd agree with that side, definitely.
In Harvey's case, I definitely say sort of creating the department in a sense, because he's created a lot of the schemes of work and started from scratch. So I'd definitely say it'd be the creating of the department.
Yeah, definitely. Sort of creating it and innovating it, and as you're saying, almost getting the department or your subject up and running across the whole school. Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good start. So we've got monitoring, assessing, progressing, creating. I'm going to think about what it is you're likely to be asked, because under the new Ofsted framework, a lot of the time they're not wanting to speak to the senior leaders in the school, they're wanting to speak to the middle leaders. So it's having to think about some of those questions that you could be asked if you're asked to go into a middle leader, come subject leader interview. What will happen normally is during the Ofsted phone call, it's been increased to 2 hours in length. It's quite a long call. The head teacher and the lead inspector will talk about subjects within the school, and they'll come to an agreement about what subjects or which subjects they want to look at. Obviously English and maths if you get picked, but then it can be any two others normally. So if you're asked to be a subject leader, having to think about what those questions could look like and that you're prepared for those discussions.
Okay.
Thinking about how we're going to get the information you need, not just to be able to jump through the Ofsted hoop, but to be able to lead your subjects. If we're doing all these things like monitoring and assessing and creating and innovating, we need to get the information to know where we are and where we're going forward. And then thinking about, we've just said about files of evidence. What sort of files do we need? Do we need reams and reams of A4 ring binders, or do we just need a few key bits of information that would be useful? And finally, who knows what they're doing? Okay, so not as in you're going away, but actually, if you got hit by a bus, who would be able to pick your subject up? Is it kept all internally, that you're the only one that knows what's going on, or has it, and Joe alluded to it when he was talking about it, have you got a team of people around you that actually you are leading it, but you've given them enough information that they'll be able to pick up and be able to talk quite confidently about the subject? And sometimes that can be a bit more tricky in primary and secondary than secondary, because obviously you've not got that department. You haven't got a science department or a history department, but it can, obviously, especially in a small secondary like Rivermead, you do end up, as Harvey's got, being the sole person in the department. You are that department. Something to think about leadership and management, because we tend to use both words. We talk about being the subject lead, but we also talk about managing our subject. Any thoughts around what that difference is between leadership and management, or is there a difference?
I would say there is a difference. Leadership is the ability to create and implement plans, where management is more about the following and facilitation of said plans.
Okay. So you think that the leading is definitely much more of the sort of, if we go back to language we're using, more the creating and the innovating and the facilitating, and the management is the following through. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Thank you, Harvey. Any other thoughts on the difference between them?
To build on sort of what Harvey said, I think again the leadership could also then be sort of lead by example as well. So if you're implementing anything within your department, for you to lead by with example and showing that, and then the management would then be to upskill your team members to be able to do the same thing. Okay,
so an element of the upskilling in the management. Okay, excellent. So I just want to have a think about the difference. And again, you know, some of these things we touched on, the managers drive their workers. They're just telling you what you need to be doing, whereas the leaders develop and coach their team members. And obviously across the trust, we use the grow coach model. So hopefully you might have been seeing that as you've gone through the year. But the idea of you're not pushing your team to do something, you are developing them, you're giving them ideas, you're giving that creativity and almost the license for them to take the subject into the direction they want under your guidance. Managers need to be needed. Managers tend to be the ones that create that dependence upon them. They are the ones that will hold things tightly inside them, and actually before you can do anything, even if it's to get a ruler or a rubber, you have to go to them to get it, because they're the ones with the big locks on their cupboard managing everything, whereas your leading want to be succeeded and surpassed. I always think the sign of a good leader, and I'm going back to my gruesome one, is that you could get hit by a bus and someone could come in and pick it up because you have led so well that it runs without you being there, that everybody knows what the expectations are within that subject, know how you do it, what the pedagogy is for it, your schemes at work and so on. Managers depending on authority, leaders using goodwill. Actually, if you've got a very good department running, or you're leading your subject, you're not having to constantly ask. People want to do it. You've infused them. You've got that goodwill built up. Recognition against reproducing, fear and enthusiasm. Again, that idea of people doing things because they want to do it. You've infused them rather than doing it because they know that they're going to be bashed over the head if they don't do it. Looking at strengths, very much we, talking about we in the department. Again, you might be thinking about, yeah, I do that, that's good, rather than I've done this, I've done that. It's we as a team. Spending their time with others, where you see it as it's part of your role. You've got to do it rather than you wanting to invest. You're putting that time into people because you honestly are passionate about your subject and you want it to move forward. Managers tend to blame for their breakdown. Leaders fix the breakdown, not the physical breakdown, but the breakdown of maybe communication or the breakdown of having schemes and things. Managers say go, leaders say let's go. So it's that idea of that team bringing it together, that influence, that taking people with you rather than managing where you're just saying do it, get on with it because I've told you to do it. And again, you know, I guess it takes that bit of bravery almost, because you're then giving back control to everybody. You're taking that step back, you're almost planting that seed, watching it grow, and then seeing the fruits really of what's grown from it. And again, you might be able to think about leaders that you've come across in your career so far. They tend to be the leaders that give you the idea and then let you run with it, rather than saying you do this, you do this, you do that. Now, sometimes there is a place for having to be very authoritative and get things done. I'm thinking about, you know, if a school is in a bad category and you need to do things immediately. But luckily, none of our schools are in a category at the moment. We're in a strong position. So it's about building that sort of influence as a subject leader, as a department lead, that you're wanting to take your team with you. Has anybody had any experience of where they've seen any of these things, good things in terms of leaders, or negative things in terms of people managing?
I've seen it with Rock. So obviously the Rivermead scheme. Quite often it is very much like it's very much a team. Like they sit down at the start of the day, they go through what everyone's doing for the day, who everyone's with. So it's very much everyone shares information with everybody, and everyone knows the situation with all the learners as well. But instead of it being a closed book just about the management make everybody aware, because it's a whole team that are involved with it all.
And how does that make you feel being part of that team?
Oh, it makes you feel really positive, really involved, rather than it feeling like it's the managers then you. It does feel like a team, which is really positive.
Excellent. So again, that almost they get that buy-in from you, and obviously the proof of it is that you go back year after year because you want to be there and feel part of that team. Thanks, Sam. Anybody else had any experiences of them?
I mean, I'll add again for the science here. It's very much Emma, who leads it, will just let you do what you think will be the best, and then she'll look back on that with you, and you can reflect together as a team. So not only are you reflecting on how things went for yourself, but then you can reflect and look and share that sort of amongst everyone, so then we can all succeed.
Excellent. So again, I like the way you bring that. It's that joint sort of success, everyone succeeding. It's not the subject lead going, oh yeah, isn't my department fantastic, look what I've done. It's that we, and we, you know, everybody in it together. So again, hopefully, you know, you can see your own traits down this leader side. But maybe if you are thinking about, you know, some of these things down the manager side, maybe they're just things that you can reflect on and think, you know, is there a way that I can move it from the left over to the right hand side? So again, thinking about subject leadership, when you might need to lead, which we want to do majority of the time, but are there times when you need to manage? Probably, yeah. If actually, you know, you've got to let's think about resources. If you went round and asked every single person, do you want blue post-it notes or red post-it notes, you end up wasting lots of time. Sometimes in terms of resourcing and getting things there, you just need to make that decision. You know, a bit of a silly example, but you know, if you're saying that, you could end up with some people using red books, some using blue books, some using green books. If you've got that choice, actually, sometimes it just needs that decision, right? We're going to use green books. Let's go on and do that department. That doesn't need to have that discussion, that work around it. Thinking about when you're going to develop and coach, thinking about your impact. Actually, and this comes back to what both you, Joe, and Sam have said, you know, am I going to get a greater impact if I include everybody within the decisions and make them feel welcome and part of it and talk about we, or am I going to get more from them in terms of impact if I just tell them they're going to do it? And again, you know, management can be successful, and as I mentioned before, there is a place for it, but the impact tends to be very short-lived. You'll get people to do things for a certain amount of time by pressuring them and telling them and putting deadlines in and get very short-term gains to get the rewards. Good subject leadership allows you to do it over time because you're taking everybody with you. Now, it's about inspiring. It's about getting even those people that don't feel overly confident maybe, or it's not their favourite subject, to be inspired to go and try. And actually they know that if they don't succeed, that you're there behind them to be able to give them that support that's needed. And that comes from you and your passion towards the subject. And again, we all do it as teachers. Sometimes we might have a subject that we really don't particularly like, but we go over and above to be passionate about it and to get that buy-in from the learners, because if they see that you're bored teaching it, how on earth are they going to be inspired to do it? So bringing your natural passion into that. Ownership as well. We've talked about the team and bringing people in and it being coaching, but actually at the end of the day, it's about you taking ownership of the subject. And I know that was one of the things that the leadership team worked especially hard at when they came in. The idea that under the previous leadership, nobody wanted to take ownership. When the previous Ofsted team came in and said, who is the, I can't even remember, I think they wanted to know who was the data lead. They got told about 3 or 4 different people, and when they went to that person, it was, no, it's not me, it's that person, or it's, no, it's not me, it's that person. So again, ultimately you taking ownership of your subject or your area and being passionate enough that you're proud to own it, using your influence. Sometimes it can be quite tricky being newly qualified and then having to tell older, maybe more senior colleagues that they need to do things differently. So again, if you can get that buy-in, if you can do it in a way where they feel part of it, your influence is going to be much greater than just telling somebody they need to do it and not really giving them the thought process behind it. And again, deciding when you need to be leading, when you need to be taking that step back and letting others go with it and then sharing in their success. So some of the key questions you might want to think about in terms of your leadership. What are the pupil standards in your subject? Do you know what the standard is in your subject? Is it part of your assessments you do? So for example, is it in pupil asset, or are there SATs tests in that lesson? Do you do PIRAs and PUMAs, or is there no formal assessment that you know of for your subject? So if there isn't, how are you going to know what those standards are? And again, we'll come back to that in a minute in terms of how we could maybe find them. How's your subject assessed or tracked? Is it assessed or tracked? If I'm doing art, for example, is there a system in place for assessing the progress of the pupils? Is there a system for tracking how well they are achieving the national curriculum objectives? Does anybody track it? If not, do you need to put something in place so it can be assessed and tracked? Is that one of the things that you're going to set as your sort of plan for next year, to find a way to assess and track my subject? If it is being assessed and tracked, is it the best possible way to do that? I know, for example, going back to my Rivermead example with pupil asset, I know that with the Rivermead progress steps, that they're talking about changing them because you've had GCSE criterion this year. Is there a way that you can include the GCSE criteria when you get to Key Stage 4, so that actually you're tracking against those Key Stage, against those GCSE key criteria that you're going to need for the grades? So, just because there's a system there doesn't mean that you can't tweak it and change it and make it work for you and the school. But how do you know? Somebody comes to you and says, right, tell me what's happening in geography. How would you know? Have you got that evidence bank somewhere? And how do you fit that in to everything else that's going on? You might feel that geography is the most important subject in the whole school. You're leading it, you're passionate, you want to make it, but then you've got history, art, science, PE, all competing for that time. You know, and again, trying to get that balance. If every single subject leader's going in and monitoring their subject every week, we're going to have some very burnt out and very annoyed staff. So how do you know without causing overload and burden on the staff? Do you know what the strengths and areas for development are in your subject? You know, you might know what your strengths and areas of development are in your teaching of that, but do you know in relation to the whole school and your colleagues and how that subject looks? Have you had a chance? If not, is there somebody on the leadership team you can speak to give you that chance to go and find out a bit more about your subject, especially if it's not got any formal assessments that go with it? Are there any underachieving groups in your subject? You know, you might know that, yes, you know, people are getting through the curriculum content, but is that all the pupils? What about your EAL children, your LAC children, your free school meals? Do boys perform better than girls in your subject? Is it particular ethnic groups? You know, nationally, it tends to be white British males that underperform. Is that the case in your subject? Or does it buck the trend? And again, it's about knowing how, you know, you can back up your statement. How would you know that? How is staff confidence and subject knowledge within your subject? You know, again, you might be really enthusiastic and your colleagues might be really enthusiastic, but they're being let down by the subject knowledge or their confidence to teach it. So is there, first of all, do you know how confident they feel? Do you need some sort of survey to find out what staff sort of confidence and knowledge is? And then can you put in the support for them? Can you do that either yourself through doing workshop sessions, or do you need to get somebody in to be able to assist you to do that? So again, before you know what CPD to put in, you have to have the idea of what the confidence levels and the subject knowledge are. What does your curriculum look like? This is quite an interesting one because with the way that the curriculum works, especially the revised Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 curriculum, choices were made in terms of what was taken in and out. So, for example, if you're doing the history curriculum, the actual statements are a lot less than they used to be. So maybe when the subject was set up, certain periods were decided to be kept in, but is that relevant now? You know, does your curriculum need looking back at, and actually we'll take that period out and we put that period back in? Do you follow a scheme, and actually is that scheme fit for purpose? Just because we've always done, I don't know, let's say we've always done white rose for our maths, does that mean that it's the best curriculum out there? Am I sure that by taking a scheme it matches the national curriculum objectives? Have I actually compared the two? Just because the publishers say it does, am I sure that if we all teach this particular scheme, are we going to cover all of the areas of the national curriculum that we need to? Thinking about deep dive questions. Now, I sort of mentioned this before. Ofsted talk very much about deep dives, and what they'll do is they'll come and they'll speak to the subject leader and they'll ask you all the questions. They very much obviously talk about the intent, implementation and impact. Now these without trying to, you know, put the fear of something into you. Sometimes these interviews can be, I don't know, an hour plus in length. Have you got the confidence in your subject to be able to talk for that length? Now, you're not going to be expected to go into a meeting by yourself, having just taken the subject over. There's always obviously members of the SLT, MLT that can go in there with you. But would you feel confident to sit down and talk in depth about your subject, why you do it, how you do it, how you know you do it, what the outcomes are, and how you can prove it? And again, in terms of being able to support you, are planning to put in some deep dives into next year for you to be able to have that practice, not just yourselves, but all of the subject leaders across all of our schools. It was planned this year, but obviously because of COVID, we've not been able to do it. So again, when you've got that opportunity, you know, can you embrace it, use it as a CPD opportunity? Because actually, yes, it might be a bit worrying to come and sit in front of somebody from the trust and talk about your subject, but far better that you don't know the answer and you go away and work out and find out that answer, rather than in front of an inspection team not really having a full understanding. So again, you know, if you want to, and it's entirely up to you once you've taken your subject over, if you'd like me to send over some deep dive questions that have been used by Ofsted within your particular subject, I'm more than happy to send them over for you to be having a look over and have a think about. So thinking about then the questions, how do I go about getting the answers? Before I continue talking for a minute, how would you go about finding out the answers to the questions that you might have about your subject?
Speak to somebody.
Yeah, excellent. I think that's really sensible. You might speak to your colleagues, you might speak to the person who's had the subject before you. I think both really good suggestions.
You could also speak to members of other schools who might have a similar role, so might be running a similar department somewhere else. If you know them from previous workplaces, ask them how it runs, or ask them those, and they hopefully might know some.
Yeah, excellent. Speak to colleagues in other locations that might have similar departments or subjects to you. Okay, let's have a think then. So before I go on to the actual reasons, there's really 3 key things to think about in terms of your next steps. Where am I currently within my subject? Obviously, before you can go forward, you need to know where you're at the moment. Now, there are going to have to be some evidence collecting. Obviously, we've talked about asking people. We'll look at a few others in a moment. Where do you want to get to? So I found out where my subject is. Where do I want to get to? Is it a number at the end? Is it I want everybody within my subject area to get expected at the end of Key Stage 2? Is it I want in my subject to get everyone's getting at least grade 3 GCSE? Is that manageable? You know, I could say, well, I want everyone to get to grade 9 in science. 1, that's not going to be manageable. 2, you know, with the needs of our learners, with the best will in the world, we're not going to get 9s across the whole department. So thinking about where am I going to get to in relation to something that's not going to set yourself up for a fall. Or is it, you know, I've just mentioned, is it just to be that when I ask pupils, they all say they enjoy the subject? You know, that there's no right or wrong answer here. Is it that I just want to get it so that people are enthused about my subject? Is I get it that we've got more people choosing it as an option at GCSE? Is it that it becomes embedded within the school, that everybody knows our school as the school you go to if you're really interested in history or geography? Is it that I want to improve life chances of the pupil, so by giving them a good feeling for basic maths, that's going to get them, you know, far better life chances? So again, thinking about what your endpoint is, and then finally how you're going to get there, because there could be quite a small gap between where you currently are, but there could also be an absolutely massive gap. So again, thinking about, you know, and I think that the title steps is a good way to think about it. You're not maybe in a year going to be able to get from where you currently are to where you want to get to. It could be it's a 3-year plan, 5-year plan. You know, it might be that you're just going to take it a term at a time. You're really not sure where you're at, so you're going to spend the first term And then maybe the second term, third term, finding out where you are before you even decide where you want to get to, because we can't just blindly head off somewhere, not knowing where we're starting and thinking about how I'm going to get there. So thinking about the first one, then where am I currently at? So we've mentioned about talking to people, so which was the first one on my list. Ask the person who's doing the subject before. If you're lucky enough to be in a department within the school, or that the previous subject leaders still there, ask them, you know, what did we do in this subject? How do you know? What information have you got? Have you got a folder I can look at? Have you got any monitoring that you've done? Learning walks, you know, really good way is to get out, go into the classroom. We've now in a lot better position in terms of our learning walks to get away from that judgment culture where we're not always going into classes and making judgments. You know, we've got our blue books. It could be that you speak to your leadership team about being part of that learning walk schedule. Actually, I really want to know what's going on in RE. Could I be part of next week's learning walk and just have a look at what's happening in my subject? And again, it comes back to that leadership element. If you've built up that trust and that teamwork within your team, rather than that managing that people think you're just going to go in there to pull their lesson apart and criticize their work in RE, you're more likely to be able to get that buy-in from staff. If you're talking about, can we just go in and see that your positives? I just want to come in and see all the great things that you're doing with artifacts in history. You come in, right, you've had a look at it, you've then picked out where your areas of strength are and where you're going to need more support. And again, as you know, picking up on what Sam said, if you can speak to people and you can involve them in it, so actually it's a development opportunity. We're going to give you support to improve your use of questioning in history, rather than you're rubbish at history, you're not very good at questioning, right, we need to put support in for you. It's how you sell it to your staff. Have you got that ethos in terms of the way the school runs, which we have, but in terms of the way you are as a leader, that people trust that you're there to support them rather than to pull them apart. People surveys, you know, very interesting how sometimes it can differ between what the staff think is happening in the subject than what the pupils are. Are they engaged? Do they enjoy the subject? What would make them enjoy it even more? And again, then going from what the pupils have said to think about ways forward. And again, it's getting that balance. You know, we can't all do exactly what the pupils want to do all the time. You are the leader within that subject. You have to use your professionalism. But can we bring in elements? If the pupils say, we really enjoyed the practical elements of the subject this year, can you go back then and put more practical elements in? If they said to you, we really liked that trip we went on, is there a way you can put more trips into your subject? Because actually, if you've got infused pupils because you're infused, then you're going to get a much better outcome. Could look at your existing scheme of work. You know, pick up the scheme work, have a read through, compare it to the national curriculum. Ask, link it, ask the staff, what do you think about the scheme work? Which bits do you particularly enjoy? Which bits don't you enjoy? Can we tweak the bits you don't enjoy? Do we actually need to have them in there? You know, is it we run out of time when we're learning about, you know, parts of the body? Can we extend that unit and maybe shorten another one? So again, having that dialogue. Looking at coverage. So again, it could be a question of taking that scheme of work, taking pupils' books and matching them up. You know, have we planned all of this to happen? But actually, in reality, when we look at the book, we're not getting the coverage. And then is that having a knock-on effect that when the pupils are going, you know, to their next stage, whether it be from key stage 1 to 2 or transitioning from year 6 to 7, they've got big chunks in their knowledge. You know, we've been really good this year, especially under the COVID situation, when our pupils came back, about doing something to identifying those gaps and then plugging those gaps. Is there something out there that would help us to be able to plug those gaps that the pupils got. Are there revision packages? Have I got some particular work that I can put in place to be able to plug those gaps and move things forward? Look at your results and the tracking of your subject. Has it been tracked before? Okay. Has it been tracked before? And what did that tracking show? And again, can sometimes be an area where we fall down. We do all of the tracking, we get all of the results, and then we don't do anything with them. So again, it's thinking through all of the bits you do. That's so what? I've done a pupil survey. So what? What am I going to do with it? I've looked at the results and I've done this test, but so what? What are you going to do with it? It's about that. And you might have people talking about that sort of closing the circle. And that's sometimes where, you know, other leaders have gone wrong. They've collected all the evidence, but then they don't act upon it. Look at the subject leaders file which exists. Have they got a subject leader file? If they haven't, do you need one? Where is all your evidence collected? And again, this is not a you must have a subject leader file, it must contain, because it might not work for you. But if you've used a basis, it might be you adapt it, you change it, because at the end of the day, it's about you feeling confident in your subject. And again, they've done particular research on it, that those people that go into meetings with Ofsted teams that walk in with a big subject leader file tend to be asked less questions. It's almost that mindset the inspector thinks, well, actually, they know about their subject. They've come in with this big file. It might have absolutely nothing in it, but they don't know that. You're coming in and you're looking prepared. You're looking like you know what you're talking about, rather than walking in with a scrappy little bit of paper screwed up on your pocket, ready for that conversation. So it's about that perception as well as having the content to back it up. So before I move on to the where do I want to get to, have you seen any of these things particularly well done by your subject leaders you've come across with so far, if you are working within a department or in your key stage?
I'll jump in and say, yeah, definitely. I mean, learning walk this year's been tricky. It's obviously COVID, but there's been virtual ones that's been going on. And then I'm sure you've probably seen them, Paul, but Emma has the best spreadsheets that I think anyone's ever seen to keep track of all the learners and where they're at. And essentially, it's amazing to see. At least she always tells us all that after a meeting that everyone wants their spreadsheets. So I like to think they're pretty good.
And actually, just picking up on what Joe just said, it is about having things for a reason. And the science department's spreadsheets that we just last week, we did some quality assurance around the teacher assessed grades at GCSE, and actually the charts that the science department created actually showed where pupils had that coverage all the way through. And I'm obviously not just saying it because Joe's here with the science department, were the best in the whole of the school, because that data was collected for a reason and it answered the question, where, you know, what grades are you giving your pupils? Where's the evidence? Emma could pull out the spreadsheet that said, here, and here is where they've covered it. Here is what they got in their assessments. This shows us they're working at this grade here. Whereas, you know, and that's not to say anybody's was particularly poor that we saw, but other staff members who had to think about and didn't really have the evidence to back up what they were saying. It just wasn't as clear as having those spreadsheets were there. But actually, it comes back to that, so what? You know, and Emma said when she came to meeting, they took her absolutely hours to do. There was a reason for it. You know, why did you do them? What was the so what? So I can show you this is what my pupils have achieved. So thank you for that example, Joe. Anyone else seen any of these particularly well done. I mean, we've all been subject to learning walks, maybe not as many as normal during this year. Have you, as somebody been on the receiving end of them, found them useful in terms of moving your subject knowledge forward or your practice forward? Or alternatively, have there been times when you felt, why did we just do that? I didn't get anything from it. I'm hoping that gone are the days where someone comes into your classroom with a clipboard, writes things, goes away, and you don't hear anything else from them. But actually, that's come from changing practice. Have you felt that, when subject leaders have looked at your subjects this year, whether it be specific to a subject or just general quality of teaching, that you found them beneficial as the person on the receiving end?
Yeah, I have. Well, last one I had was beneficial. That was really helpful, actually. At least knows what the thing is. Most of the time, when I have any kind of feedback, it's usually something more lines of I don't mean to say criticism as such, but more of a constructive feedback. This time it was a bit more the other way around. I think he was in for my geography lesson a while back, and it was nice to know I had things go right in my lessons. What I mean to say is that it's that, yeah, this went well, this went well, this went well. That means, okay, I keep doing those things. It's nice to have it that way around for a change rather than need to do this. So I need to know what I just need to keep doing.
Okay, so again, I think that's, really important. So if you can take what's worked for you when you've been on the receiving end, you might then be able to incorporate some of that when you're doing it to your, I don't really like the word you're doing it to, but when you are working with colleagues in terms of developing your subject. So again, we might be new on our subject leader journey, but we're not new on people monitoring our lessons, looking at our books, asking the pupils in our classes questions. So if you can take the positives and when it's happened to you, and hopefully we are all in schools where we've got people that model it effectively, we can then use that ourselves. Excuse me. So thinking about where you want to get to, we thought about the ways that we can collect the evidence. So are you going to do it long term over 3 years? Are you going to do it longer over 5 years? Are you just going to do it yearly? Now, you might have seen or you might not have seen, because they've only recently changed, and they might still be in the process of being written, but we've changed our school development plans in all of our schools to 3-year plans now. So when you do get to see them, later on this year or early next year, you'll see that at the front of them, there's now quite a small 1-page overview of what you're going to do over 3 years before we go to the detail. That way, you're being that bit more strategic, because some things you can't achieve within a year. And actually, it's unrealistic to, think, let's say, for example, you're going to change a whole scheme of work, implement it, assess it, and get better results all within a year. Some things you need to extend. So have a think when you come to write your subject development plan. Can I make it more long term? You don't have to achieve everything over 1 year. And then from your 3 years, you can break down into a bit more detail into yearly. So over 3 years, this is what I'm going to achieve. Well, actually, if I break it down into year 1, I'm going to achieve this, then year 2 into this, then year 3. Again, doesn't have to be a massive document. As I say, your 3 years can be a page. Your yearly then adds a bit more detail to it. And then you could split it into terms. Again, I'm referring back to it because it's the latest thing we did. The school development plans for next year, for the first time, aren't going to be yearly. They've got a 3-year overview. There is a plan for what's going to be done yearly, but that actually split into terms. So the development plan, when you see it for next year, says term 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, but actually only term 1 and 2 is written, because even at senior leadership level, what we're finding is that people are writing development plans and then they end up in a cupboard or they end up, you know, on a wall, but then they're not revisited until the end of the year. And then we go, oh yeah, we haven't done that. Oops, we should have done that. So by breaking it down into old terms, so term 1 and 2 together, and thinking, right, this is what I'm going to do, we can make them much more focused and much more specific. We know where we're going because we've got our yearly, we've got our 3 yearly, but actually in terms of actions, we then know exactly what to do, and then we can almost assess against that at the end of each term. We're not going, oh, I'll leave that to term 5 and 6, I'll leave that to 5 and 6, and then get into term 5 and 6 when it gets really busy and then nothing gets done. So again, you know, could be something that you consider within your subject plan. Can I break it down into terms so I know exactly what I'm going to be doing each term? And then frequent and robust checking is going to be the key to that success. Going back, challenging yourself. You know, I said I was going to do this in term 1 and 2. Have I done it? How do I know I've done it? If somebody says to me, you know, I've written down on my term 1 and 2, quality of questioning in science is really great. Well, that's great if it is, but if somebody asks me to prove it, have I got the evidence to back that up? Yes, to an extent, people need to take your word for it because you're the subject leader, but we do need to have that little bit of evidence behind it to say, yes, it is, because I know, because X, Y, and Z shows us that this is happening. So it's not about keeping records for record's sake, but it's just being able to check and be frequent. So again, this whole idea of not leaving it all to the end of the term and then thinking, oh, I haven't done anything right, I'm going to do book monitoring, I'm going to do pupil survey, I'm going to do learning walks, and then it just becomes unmanageable for you, and it becomes unmanageable for the people that you're doing it with, because if you've got the history lead, the geography lead, the science lead all doing exactly the same, it ends up putting undue pressure onto everybody. So again, how are you going to get there? So again, I would, and this is the suggestion, split it up into tasks and actions, either, you know, termly. This is what I'm going to do in term 1. What that intended outcome is going to be. What is it you want from doing that task? Again, if you can't answer what that intended outcome is going to be, my question to you would be, why are you doing it? If you don't know what the reason is. If I'm doing a learning walk because I think that's what I should do, but I'm not going to get anything out of it, maybe save yourself some time and don't do it. If I'm doing a learning walk because I want to find out how good questioning is within my subject, then you've got your intended outcome. What resources am I going to need? You know, it could be physical resources. If I want to improve the use of I don't know, I want to use improve the use of artifacts. If I haven't got any artifacts, then I'm not going to get very far. So I might need to buy physical resources, and I might need to see the senior leadership team about putting in for a budget if I haven't got one already. It could be resources just in terms of your time. To be successful at being your subject leader, it's about trying to fit it in to what you're already doing, not bolting it on. You know, I can, without speaking to you, I can probably make a pretty educated guess that none of you go home at 3:30 every day and sit there with your feet up on the table because you've got nothing to do. You're all extremely busy people. Taking on a subject is extra responsibility. So how can I fit that in to my already busy day? Now, if I am going to do a learning walk, what's it instead of, rather than what's it on top of what I'm already doing, because that is what's going to cause you burnout and make yourself ill if you're trying to juggle everything. So actually, if I want to do a learning walk, is there somebody that can cover my class during the day so that I can be going to do it, and then a little bit of time to write it up? Is it that I want to speak to do a book monitoring? Does it have to be done after the school day? You know, there might be times where there isn't spare time in the timetable, but can I put it in so that I'm doing that book monitoring during, you know, where someone can be doing something in my classroom? Is there a way, if I'm got 2 year 5 classes, say, that my year 5 colleague could take the whole group with enough sufficient TAs that we do a task together, and then I return the favour to them next week so that they can go and have a look at their subject across the school. You know, lots of ways. It's about being creative around being able to do it. Then thinking about your CPD. So I've identified, you know, there might be a gap in questioning within my subject. Again, you're not expected to be the font of all knowledge. You know, it might be that you've got that expertise that you can run a session for staff. It might be you ask other colleagues in the school that have got it. It might be you have to look outside. It might be that you have a look through the National College, as we've just bought it as a resource, to see if they've got anything about effective questioning in science. So again, just being able to identify that relevant CPD. And then at the end of that, when I put that CPD in, what am I going to do? Am I going to say, yeah, I'm happy staff have got that, they're good at questioning science, or am I going to go back to the top and do another follow-up for questioning in science? And then do I need to do it in as much depth? I might have looked at all the classes in the school, but for my check and balance, this constant monitoring and robust, you know, system, am I just going to look into a free class and say, yeah, I can see the benefit of that CPD. That is my evidence that the CPD I've put in works. And again, interim milestones. If you aren't going to do your development plan over terms and you're going to do it yearly, have I got milestones on the way? What does success against my subject development plan look like at the end of term 2? What does it look like at the end of term 4? You know, it's that constant checking back in to see where you are in relation to those milestones. And who's it going to be led by? You know, does it always have to be you? Yes, you might be the subject lead for that subject, but there might be other people that can take the lead in it. Am I going to give that to another colleague that's going to lead in that area because that's their area of their success? Am I going to ask my senior leadership team? You know, I really think that we need to improve, I have to use myself, really need to improve questioning in science. Is there somebody on the senior leadership team that's really good at questioning? Can I ask them to lead the session? Can I ask somebody at the trust? You know, that's what we're here for at the end of the day. You've got a director of school improvement, you've got a strategic lead for teaching and learning. Can you ask them? I'm really struggling to get across questioning in my subject. Can you either come and do a session for me, or can you find somebody that can help me? You know, we haven't got that teaching commitment that you've got. Yes, we are busy people, but we are there to support you. You know, how can I, hand on heart, say I'm developing teaching and learning across the trust if when you come and ask me a question, I say, well, I'm interested, I'm too busy? Because actually it's in my interest if your subject's good, because then the teaching and learning in that subject's going to improve. So again, it's about, you know, and I'm sure we are, about being confident and being upfront and having those conversations. And actually the strongest leaders are the ones that say, actually, I don't know all the answers myself. Can somebody help me? Thinking about why it's worked or not. And again, you know, it's a very constant pattern, this evaluating. Is it constant? Have you got interim points at the end? We don't want to get to the end of the year. What were the barriers? If you haven't been successful, you know, identify what they were. Were the barriers physical? I couldn't create what I wanted to do because we physically didn't have space to run these groups. Was it we didn't have the expertise? When we went to do it, we didn't really fully understand what we're doing, so we need to put more training in. Were the barriers time? I thought that I'd be able to do all of this monitoring and assessing. When I spoke to the SLT, there just wasn't time within the day. Is it financial? I really wanted to develop the use of artifacts in history, but there just wasn't the budget for me to go out and buy them. I borrowed some from the local library. I did get some, but actually it would have been far more successful had I had a pot of money to buy some of my own. So identifying what the barriers are, sharing your successes. You know, we are notoriously bad as a profession. When we get any feedback, we tend to go straight to the negative. We miss out all the successes. We might have 10 things that are really great about our lesson, and one area of development, we tend to focus on the area of development. So it's about making sure you share your successes with yourself, with your team, with your senior leadership team. And then this important part, you know, this is what's happened at the end of the year. These were the things that weren't so good. These were the things that were good. What am I going to do as a result? So always coming back to that. And just really, I guess it's a nice way of saying that. So what? This is what's happened. So what? What am I going to do as a result of this? You know, it could be positive, could be negative. You know, we've all achieved the highest GCSE results ever. Really fantastic. What am I going to do as a result? Am I going to continue some of those things? Am I going to tweak it and get even higher? And again, even when it's not going right, I've just done a learning walk. Actually, the teaching of art across the school is terrible. All anybody's doing is drawing stick people. Yes, I might be really disappointed, but what am I going to do as a result? Am I going to put some CPD in to help people? Am I going to see if there's a specialist art teacher that can go round to some of the classes to support? So again, it's always that thinking what I might need to do next. And then obviously that will give you your particular result. So in terms of then just bringing it all together in terms of, you know, a toolkit. Now, what I found particularly useful, and again, you know, this is just to suggest you don't have to. I use a similar version for the teaching and learning every term, but I have used them when I've been subject leader before. Just creating yourself almost an Excel spreadsheet, putting across down one side all of your classes, your teachers, going across the top all of the key things you're doing, and almost rag rating it, you know, to build up that picture. So my year 2 teacher, they were really good at their covering their curriculum. Progression of skills, not so great. And then you build up a pattern. You know, if they've got all greens going across, then I could probably rag rate them green. But they've got a red over here on progression of skills. So actually, I know I need to do some work there. Now, we are moving away, not only at trust level, but at government level as well, from grading. So again, this was an older version. You know, it might be that you get rid of that language. It might be you just have it as effective, non-effective, capable, needs more support. Again, that the wording really is down to you, but it's about you building up a picture of your subject. Is it that I'm finding that in year 3 they need some support about medium-term planning? So again, it allows you to build up patterns. Is it the lower school, pupil voice is really strong, but as they get up the school in my DT, if I'm leading DT, that pupils aren't enjoying it very much. So I might then put my focus there. It allows you to build up a picture. And again, these titles can fit to whatever you're doing. I just put a few others you might look at. You might look at the use of the learning environment within my subject, the use of resources, practical elements, how much curriculum time is given to it. But again, it just gives you almost that one page that you can go into a meeting without having to flick through page and page in your file and say, when someone says to you, tell me about your subject, I can say, well, in year 3, it's particularly strong. They're especially strong in relation to their progression of skills. I've identified that year 5 maybe need a little bit more work around their pupil voice, because we're finding the pupils aren't enjoying it. It just gives you something to be able to talk about and talk confidently to build that picture up around, you know, your subject within the school. So that would be one suggestion that I'd give you in terms of having that toolkit. Another one as well is in terms of having an action plan. And that might be within your school, and it might be something you need to check that you've already got quite detailed subject action plans. If you haven't, again, I'm more than happy to send you through this one. I'm not holding this up as a great one. This is just one that I've used again previously that wasn't too onerous, because you don't want something that's got thousands and thousands of columns to complete. So again, just tells me what I'm trying to achieve, what tasks I'm going to do to achieve it, what success is going to look like within that area, how it links to the school development plan. Does it link to the school development plan? So again, can make it even more effective if you are trying to link your subject into that school development plan to bring the two elements together. And then your evaluation, what that impact looks like. So again, thinking about it in terms of the Ofsted criteria of intent, implementation and impact. Now it could be, as we've talked about, doing the milestones, you do an evaluation at the end of term 2, 4, 6. It could be if your whole development plan is split into terms, this is term 1, then you have one for term 2, one for term 3, or so on. Again, you've got that flexibility there to work on. Subject leader file. Again, these are just some of the things that you might want to put within your subject leader file. Has your subject got a current subject policy? If they have, where is it? And do staff know what it is? Do I need to do some work about revisiting it? Is it out of date? And are staff aware of what that subject policy looks like? The part of the school development plan that links to my subject is that, let's say, again, as it's been a bit of a theme, something is the school development plan all around question across the school. So that's the part of the development plan. I'm then in geography going to look at questioning within geography. Was there part of your subject plan, your subject in the last Ofsted report? Did it mention your subject? If it did, especially if it was identified as an area to work on, that could be one of the key things they come back to. So if I'm the IT lead and it said in the last Ofsted report, pupils do not make effective use of IT within the school, then I know that's something I need to be working on. The audit of your curriculum, your development plan, your list of jobs. Do you need to do an audit of resources? Do you know what resources are available for your subject? Have you got that list? Copy of your scheme of work or your curriculum map that's delivered in each classroom. Again, that will allow you to be then assessing whether you're getting coverage. Copy of your teacher's planning. Again, some of our teachers might not do planning straight onto paper. They might do it straight onto their whiteboard. Is there a way that you can capture that? Monitoring schedule and monitoring reports. You know, any copies of any monitoring you've done, the schedule. So when someone says to you, well, you haven't done any monitoring of art this year, well, you can say, well, actually, no, we're in term 3. It's put down that it's going to be done in term 6. So again, just having that known where your subject might fit into the bigger picture. Any assessment information you've got could be SATs results, teacher assessments, test results, record of your budget and how you spent it, and any other useful notes, readings, diary entries if you've kept a diary of particular things. So again, all suggestions you might want to include in there. One A4 folder, ring binder, you've got it to be able to keep everything in one place rather than bits of paper here, bits of paper there. And then maybe answers to the deep dive questions if you think that's relevant and you've asked, you know, got them sent over to you. Maybe as a department, you could answer one a week if you have departmental meetings. Could be that you sit down and have a think about those answers and talk them through with somebody. Or it could be just have the list of questions there and go through them in your mind. How would I answer that? Oh, okay, yeah, feel happy to answer that. So in terms of just bringing our bits together, I would say definitely use your team. If you've got a department, make sure you use it fully. Make sure you share out the workload. Have a clear plan for what you want to achieve going forward in your subject next year, whether that be 3-year, 1 year, termly. Stick to your plan. Now, if you've taken the time to stick to your plan, don't just file it and stick it in your subject leader file. Use it. You know, scribble on it, draw on it. It's not there to look pretty. It's there to be a working document for you to be able to use. Make sure you build time in to evaluate. Always be thinking about that. So what? I've done this. So what? What's the result of doing that? And then, you know, don't be afraid to ask all of those around you any questions you've got, because obviously everybody's been in that stage where they've taken on a subject and they've taken on a new role. You've come from, you know, a massively difficult year with COVID. You know, you've done fantastically well to get, you know, and I'm not being patronising, you've done fantastically well, you know, to get through NQT year with everything that's going on. You know, lots of experienced teachers have found it really, really difficult. So well done for that. You know, ask those questions. You know, they're always here to help you. Is there anybody that has any further questions that they'd like to ask? No at all. No? Well, hopefully that's given you a little bit of food